Hello, everyone. I'm the real life fake wizard, and joining with me here today is Odin from OMB Reviews. How we doing, my friend? Good to see you.
I'm doing okay. Back to school, but ready to break down some box office numbers with you.
Well, thank you for being here. There's something really big happening in the Hollywood zeitgeist, right? With Spider-Man going on right now, and really everybody's saying that this thing is breaking records, that it's blowing the doors off of this thing, and I wanted to bring you on and maybe help explain. Where are we at now? Where are we looking to go? And what is the deal with this Spider-Man Brand New Day box office?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the film really is doing very well. You know, as I always like to tell people, I am an inflation bro. So shout out to my inflation bros out there. And what that essentially just means is that I like to look at numbers as fairly as possible. And so whether that is comparing numbers, adjusting for inflation to get the actual value of films from 10, 15, 20 years ago, or whether it's looking at ticket sales, either one of those is going to get us to a better understanding of just how well this film is performing, but also maybe how not well the film is performing, because it is indeed setting a lot of what I like to call nominal records, right? Nominal meaning just unadjusted for inflation. And there's no doubt about that whatsoever, right? The film is doing phenomenally well there. But at the same time, to say that it's doing better than Avengers Endgame, right? That's like the big comparison, obviously.
Right.
You have to then go back to when that film came out, what the value of the dollar is today, and then also, most importantly, how many ticket sales that movie would have had. Because at this point, yes, right now Spider-Man Brand New Day is tracking very, very well. Does it have a chance to even match and exceed that nominal number that was reached by Endgame? It actually does have a chance. It's got a long way to go to get there, but it's at least mathematically possible at this point. But does that mean that it's going to have had more butts and seats than Endgame? At this point, it's just not looking like that is going to be the case. And that's why inflation is so important. And that's really what I think a lot of this discussion has to really start to focus on.
Right. I think that's been a very important topic, especially in just our internet YouTube sphere, right? Talking about inflation and why it matters and why we track it, right? Because, you know, what is the one movie that would be worth the most? Is it not Gone with the Wind still? So, like, even all these years later, Gone with the Wind still has made the most money when inflation is applied. With Spider-Man now, they're saying that it's possibly in the ballpark of breaking $3 billion. Do you personally think that that's actually still in play?
I feel like I might be one of the few that has kind of like held to that. I did an article for KCGamers.com recently where I mentioned 2.5 billion seems to be a lock at this point. 3 billion is a possibility. And as the numbers are coming out, we're obviously tracking this thing. And what's interesting to me is when you look at just the domestic numbers, right, the comparison between it and Endgame, because that's where it seems to be tracking pretty well with. What's interesting is that it's doing better than Endgame did at the same point of its release, but only by about like 6% or so, which again, in the realm of hundreds of millions of dollars is quite a lot. But in general, if that were to hold, right, if that percentage difference were to hold, that would actually mean Brand New Day will only end its run at about maybe $915 million domestically, which again is still very, very good. But if it only gets that point domestically, that would make it a lot less likely for the film to get to $3 billion, right? Because it is well over $1 billion internationally now. It's at like $1.1 billion internationally now. And it's tracking to do probably around 1.4, 1.5 billion just from that market. So if it's able to get to $1 billion domestic, maybe even more, and if it's able to do even better internationally, and again, we still have a long ways to go, then maybe we do see it at $1 billion, $1.1 billion domestically, and then $1.5 billion, $1.6 billion internationally. And once those numbers are there, that's when you get to 2.7, 2.8, and almost $3 billion. And so, yeah, essentially, it's tracking well enough to where 2.5 billion seems to be a lock. The way that I typically track these numbers is I look at the historical data, and most films, on average, tend to make about 70% of their entire global box office in their first 2 weekends globally. And the range is between 50 and 70% on average. That's where most films tend to perform. So if that does hold for this movie, let's say it doubles its box office. I don't think that's going to happen. That would be crazy. That would be like, it would have to have some pretty insane holds to have that. It's not really having those kinds of holds at this point. But that would put it at like a max of $3.3 billion. Now, again, I don't think that's going to happen because it's not tracking that way. The low end of it, though, let's say it's at the lower part of that average, a 70% box office total in the first 2 weekends. That would put it at $2.3 billion. And so most films tend to perform that range. This seems to be performing basically at the average range of that, which would put it a little over $2.5 billion and almost close to $2.8 billion in certain metrics. So do I think $3 billion is on the table? It is on the table. It's mathematically possible. Most likely, I would not be surprised if it ends between 2.5 and 2.8 billion.
So we look at that, and that's an unfathomable amount of money, especially when it comes to comparatively to things like Thunderbolts or Captain America: Brave New World, which none of those performed well at all, right? But like, what I'm seeing now, and that's really why I wanted to talk to you, is what I'm seeing now is the people that are perhaps the marketing end of Hollywood, the content creator end of Hollywood, where I would say I would classify them as shills. They are starting to run narratives, and let me know if you've seen this. They're running narratives saying that the box office is back. They're saying that Hollywood is back, and they have to do that. I understand why they're doing it. They're trying to incentivize you to go see the movies and participate in the ecosystem. Like, it's all marketing. Is that true? Is that real? Is that realistic? Or are they lying?
I mean, if their perception of box office success and Hollywood success and the theaters being back is the number that's being made, then that's the reason why they're convincing a lot of people. The problem, though, is that it is not matching up to the reality of butts in seats. And at the end of the day, when you compare the films from even just 5-10 years ago, right? It's one thing, and this is where I think usually the straw man argument comes up when you bring up inflation. They're like, oh, you're just going to bring up films from the 1930s and then compare for inflation? Of course it's going to be bigger. It's like, well, yes. But even if you just go 5-10 years ago, where the culture is not all that much different, where movie-going habits are in general about the same, obviously COVID had a huge impact, but even in the post-COVID era, what you're starting to notice is that because ticket prices have gone up so crazily, and that's the thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough. When you go back to the history of how ticket prices changed over time, it usually kept up with inflation, right? It usually went up, a little bit here and there, but it's a pretty steady progression, right? But then when you look at just the last 5 years, it goes up exponentially, right? Before COVID, it was at maybe $10 a ticket, right? As far as the average ticket price across the country. Nowadays, it's closer to $16 a ticket. And for that to happen in such a short period of time, that is where I think a lot of these Hollywood elites and the media shills, and I totally agree, I call them the same thing, I think that fits. What they're doing is they're trying to say, yes, look at all the money being made, while at the same time, not just adjusting for inflation, as far as like the totals, comparing those to films from a few years ago, but more importantly, the number of people going to see the things, right? Because you have less people going to see movies today, and more money is still being taken, or about the same amount of money is being taken, and that can only be sustained for so long. Just go ahead and ask Avatar. That's been a very fun story that's come out recently, is, maybe Avatar's done. And I remember a lot of the Avatar fanboys were kind of going after me when I said that the film was not, like the franchise was on the decline. That, hey, if you're losing about $1 billion of value every single film, you can only sustain that for so long. The same thing goes here. You can only jack up the prices so long before eventually you've got no one going to the theater anymore, and then those theaters go bankrupt and close because they can't show them anymore because, yes, the studio might be doing well, but the theaters, not so much, because they can also only raise their popcorn prices so much to make up for those ticket sales.
Oh, I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, we're coming off the back of the Odyssey being this juggernaut, perhaps. Is it? I mean, maybe that's a side question in a second, but everything with the Odyssey that we saw is, IMAX everything, 70 millimeter. You got to see it in IMAX, got to see it in IMAX. To even right now today, and I'm in North Carolina, I'm on the East Coast here, but I still can't get IMAX tickets. It's still hard for me to find, either because they're not available where is nearby, or they're available, but it's at really inconvenient work scheduling times, right? So, but that was for pre-order for a long time ago, about a year before the movie was out. The 70 millimeter went on sale, and people were selling their tickets for $500 on eBay, massive profits on that. So I guess the question I have is something like the Odyssey breaking into the culture in the way that we're being told it is, based on the numbers you think on your end?
Yeah, that's where it's like it's a both end. It's like, yes, it is. Like, are there a lot of people going to see the Odyssey? Yes, the numbers very clearly, kind of paint that out. Is it as many as the numbers would make us think? No. And the reason why is because for the Odyssey especially, this goes for a lot of like the big budget, usually the superhero comic book genre, but Odyssey's in the same boat here because it pushed those IMAX tickets so hard. But because of that, it also means that their average ticket price of the people going to see their movie is that much higher compared to the regular ones, right? With Spider-Man, for instance, Spider-Man is driving out everybody to all the showings. People are going to the 3D showings, even though 3D sucks. People are going to the regular 2D showings, right? And so yeah, it does. And so because of that, right, the average ticket price is going to be a little bit lower because you've got more people, or a lot of people rather, going to your regular 2D showings, not premium format, and so hitting that average ticket price a little bit better. Whereas with the Odyssey, you have people going to those non-IMAX screens. You do have people going outside of that, but because so many more, and because of that concentration, remember opening weekend, they said over 50% of the ticket sales were from premium screens, with 25, a quarter of all ticket sales opening weekend from IMAX alone. So that is, again, an important factor because, yes, it might be a high percentage for Spider-Man 2, not to the same degree as it is for this one. So that's why both films are driving out a lot of people. But the numbers of what's being reported is, again, when it comes to Spider-Man, not probably as impressive butts and seats-wise compared to some of the biggest MCU films from several years ago. But then also for the Odyssey, even less people going compared to what the actual total box office is indicating. And as I said, is it making money? Yes. It is now officially profitable, even with the 20% cut that Nolan gets, right? It is now making money. But as far as how many people are actually seeing it, it's not as many as people might think because, again, that average ticket price has gone up so high for it and for a lot of films these days.
Do you think that studios like Universal or Disney or Sony care that there's less people seeing the movies? Like, because this is something that people would discuss online, and it's like, oh, well, they don't care that people aren't seeing it in mass as they had before. They just care that they're breaking even and making profit. Do you think that they're talking about that? And if so, what would they be saying? Is this positive or negative?
I mean, they'd be stupid if they decided just to buy into like their own hype, basically, because yes, they are happy, right? Because in many of these cases, especially with the Odyssey, especially with Brand New Day, because they're seeing the money, right? They're like, okay, that money total is what matters the most because it makes us our money back. It makes us profit theatrically. When it comes to a lot of these things, especially Spider-Man, there's obviously a lot of profits to be made after the fact because of all those extra, things that happen after the fact with Blu-ray and DVD sales. And obviously, Disney's very happy because they're getting profit from this too. And then they also get all the merchandising sales as well, which is going to probably see an uptick because of the success of this movie too. So you do have that going on, but I think they would be stupid to not have some concern because as profitable as they are and all the money that they're getting, if the theaters aren't surviving or if the theaters are, again, obviously getting a lot of a big bump recently. All right, theaters are probably very happy right now because they got two films driving out people to the box office. But the fact is that once these two films are done, like once the hype around them is done, there's really nothing. Like you look at the release schedule right now, and there's basically nothing until, I know for me, I'm not excited until November, until Godzilla Minus Zero.
Godzilla.
For some people, it may not be until Dune comes out in December, or Avengers Doomsday comes out in December. So there's going to be these long lulls of just nothing. And theaters, because rents are going up, obviously the prices of everything are going up because of inflation, because of recent, actions across the world that are affecting our prices, right? All these things come together. So they would be really silly to not care about theaters because theaters are going to be hurting very, very soon and have been. Again, you look at all the theaters that have closed since COVID, when you look at how, again, ticket sales are not as impressive as these numbers make them seem to be, it's like a short-term game for these studios. And if they don't look at the long-term implications, then they're going to start to really regret not caring.
It always feels so crazy to think like, oh, well, there's, $1 billion is on the table. This movie made $1 billion. This movie made $1 billion. We had the Super Mario Galaxy movie earlier this year. That did, pretty well. It didn't pass the first one, but it did pretty well. And it's like, and that's not enough anymore. And I think that that's like kind of odd how much the culture has shifted. But you brought up, we have Dune and Doomsday coming up. Mm-hmm. Based on the numbers, is there any way to consider that Doomsday is going to be a success now? I mean, for a long time, people have been speculating, oh, well, the MCU is not doing too good, and the DCU isn't helping superhero genre. Mm-hmm. I mean, where are we standing with Doomsday now after Spider-Man was explosive?
Yeah, I mean, Doomsday is in a very interesting situation because of its budget, right? We don't have the final numbers yet, but the early indicator is that we're talking with both budget and marketing combined, probably north of $1 billion being spent on just this one movie. Not on both films, not on Doomsday and Secret Wars, but just on Doomsday. And when you're spending that much money, it means you need to make probably close to $2.5 billion just to break even. And is that a possibility for this film? Oh, yeah, sure. It's a possibility, right? There's definitely a chance that it could do that kind of money. It could do $2 billion. It could do $2.5 billion. I mean, it could be the biggest film ever. We just don't know that yet. And all we have to go off of is how the MCU has performed over the last several years. And with the exception of Spider-Man, it has not really done all that well. So if the film is really good, and again, right now the history of everything doesn't seem to indicate that we should have a lot of hope that it will be really, really good. So maybe you get that massive opening weekend, but then you have kind of a situation like you had with the Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, right? Where it had this $450 million global opening, which for the time was good, and then it fell off a cliff because it was a really bad film and no one really wanted to see it anymore. And so, Doomsday is going to have to do a lot to make its money back. So will it make a lot of money? I think globally, the raw numbers will be big. I think I think 1.5 billion is probably guaranteed for that film. And if it's even halfway decent, 2 billion on the table, etc. We won't know until we get a little bit more. It just doesn't really feel like, again, this might just be my own bias here, but I don't feel the same hype for this Doomsday as I did for Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man seemed to have a lot more kind of natural excitement, and that's why it just destroyed all the projections and it's making all the money, and no one really expected it to do as well as it's doing. Whereas with Doomsday, again, yeah, it'll have that MCU, that MCU opening potentially, but it just doesn't really feel like. And if it doesn't, that's the other thing too. The one thing that Brand New Day has done to the detriment of Doomsday is now Doomsday has to perform. So if Doomsday comes in with even $1 less than the opening for Spider-Man, it's already going to be a bad sign. Because if one superhero, with obviously a couple of characters here and there throughout his movie, is able to drive that much money, but Doomsday with all of that money, with all those stars, star power, all those chairs they showed, right, in the little promo for it, over a year ago, I mean, that is going to be a devastating thing for them. So do I think it'll make a lot of money box office-wise? Yes. Do I think it's going to make profit? That I doubt at this point. But again, only time can really tell on that one.
Do you think that there is maybe negative ramifications if this thing really is to underperform? I don't think it will. I think it's going to be a hit now after seeing how explosive Spider-Man was. I think that was indicative of what Doomsday. Just personally, I think that's a pretty good omen for the Disney company. But if it did underperform, do we think that there's going to be any kind of collateral damage? Is there going to be a ripple effect across Hollywood if something as big as Doomsday was to fail?
It really just depends on how big of a failure it is, right? If it somehow is able to get to 2 billion, for instance, even though we can look at those numbers and we can see those budgets and we can do some calculations and see that's not a success for you guys, right? That's not really making a lot of money, if any money. In fact, you're probably losing money still at that point. They can still take that number and say 2 billion, one of the biggest movies of the year, and they can run with it, right? A lot of these companies, it honestly seems like they try to build themselves up so much, and maybe I'm not an expert when it comes to stock markets or things like that, but part of me almost wonders if they have gotten to the point where they have to spin all of these things just to keep their shareholders happy, just so that way their stock value doesn't drop. So again, if they get to 2 billion, they'll probably be able to convince a lot of people and therefore increase their value or maintain their value as a company, even though we can look at the numbers behind the scenes and say, oh yeah, you're still not actually making money there. So, will it actually teach them anything? Will there be long-term ramifications? Maybe. But Disney has shown itself, especially as out of all the companies, to be the most hard-headed. I mean, you just look at all the films that have come out, and it's very clear, even when they see losses, even when they are failing to make money back or to, see a reduction in audience size, they keep doubling down, it seems. They keep going forward. So I wish they would learn a lesson from this. I doubt that they will. And because this number is likely to be quite large and probably the second biggest of the year, right behind Spider-Man, again, that's where I'm personally at right now. I think Spider-Man will be the biggest of the year because, yes, this does bode well for them to a point. But here's a key thing. There's no real lead-in to the next movie. There's no lead-in to Doomsday from Spider-Man. It's like you can say that the end credit scene, but a lot of people hated the end credit scene. Because it was they waited until the very end, and then it was nothing. And they were like, wow, I just wasted all that time just waiting for that small moment. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens through all this. And I hope it has an impact, but they've been hard-headed, so I don't think they will.
Well, Odin, thanks for coming on and talking through some of this box office stuff with me. I really appreciate it. Let the people know what you got going on and where we could find you.
Yeah, you can find me over at OMB Reviews on YouTube, also on Rumble and on X as well. You can follow me for box office breakdowns. Every Friday morning, I do a preview for the box office, and then Sunday afternoons, I do my breakdown breakdown, write for articles on geeksandgamers.com, same topics. And then, of course, both of us are on Friday Night Tights every Friday. Not really nighttime, but afternoon. You can catch us there.
All right, y'all. That'll do it for us here. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire, and cancel Disney Plus. All right, take care.